Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. I'm your host, Nick Bowens, and today I'm joined by Keith Kavanaugh, currently the Senior Content Optimization Analyst with MSG Networks, focused on the New York Rangers. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm good, Nick. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I appreciate you taking the time to chat here, and I know that you've been a follower and a user of the Working in Hockey newsletter and socials. So excited to chat here and get into your hockey journey.
100%. I love everything you're doing, and I'm excited to kind of help out with the cause.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right into your current role. Like I said, focused on the Rangers, focused on content optimization. Tell the people a little bit about your current day-to-day description.
Perfect. Yep. So I've been at the Rangers about a year and a half now, and it's mostly focused on the content strategy and the analytics behind all the things the Rangers are posting on their social media. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all those things. We're looking at different metrics. We're trying to see, what the Rangers are doing well, what could be kind of performing better than it currently does, and then also looking around the league, all different NHL teams, and then also like NBA. You're trying to take inspiration from those kind of teams to then bring it back to the Rangers side of things. And I think just most of that is me working cross functionally across marketing, helping with their campaigns on social, but then also the content team and the video team, especially with different formats, the different ways that they post on their social, different times to optimize their metrics. So, like engagements, impressions, video views are the three main things that the Rangers content team focuses on. And then I just kind of assist in all that information to them because most of the people that are posting it or that are shooting at the games, they're not necessarily analytically driven. They have a sense of what is doing well, but then I come in with the facts and the data to let them know that it actually is doing well and we should keep doing more of this, or maybe this isn't doing as well as we'd expect, and where we can kind of tweak it a little bit to make it better.
Oh, that's super interesting. I think it sounds like a lot of kind of facilitation and curation between the strategy side and the creatives, like you said, the people down on the floor with the cameras and everything. I feel like that's something that typically bigger businesses have those roles where they can focus on these analytics. And I feel like that's relatively new in the hockey world or in the sports world. Talk to me about kind of the skill set that it takes for a position like that, how you first found out about it, and how you landed in this role.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say taking a step back first, like how I landed in the role, it was just a simple, like you've been posting on your newsletter, right? It's just a link that was available on the website. I saw it and it was interesting. As someone who's always loved hockey, at the time I was working at DraftKings, which wasn't necessarily hockey focused, my role there. So basically, I was like, you know what, MSG, working for the Rangers, that would kind of get me more on the hockey side of things. So I just randomly applied through a link online, ended up going through like 5 rounds of interviews, like a HR, hiring manager, both content people on the Rangers and the Knicks side, and then an analytics guy. And basically from there, just after doing all the interviews, they were only going to hire one person for this role, but they actually hired two. And then one person would be focused on the Knicks and one person on the Rangers. The person they hired on the Knicks side was more inclined on basketball. So it just worked out well that I had a stronger passion about hockey. So that worked out well. And then like what kind of skills I need, basically, I'd say like an analytics background is kind of broad. So for this kind of role, it's more on the analysis side as opposed to like the data modeling side. So
Yep.
looking at all the numbers, putting it in visually appealing dashboards for like in Tableau, and then from there taking that information and making concise strategic decisions for senior leadership, for the content teams to really break down these numbers, but show it in a way that makes sense to them. So I basically went back to grad school and during COVID, got a master's in business analytics at the University of Virginia. And then that's kind of the skill set I built where working in Tableau, building dashboards, and then taking that information and putting it into PowerPoint slides to just give strategic, concise points on the data so that people are able to then make business decisions that help them grow. And I think a lot of what I do is taking complex data and just being able to communicate that in a concise way is kind of the big pillars of this role.
No, that's very cool. I think it's a very cool role, and I think there's a lot of different ways that I can take the conversation there. But I want to touch on, like you said, you went back to grad school. I think that that's sometimes a difficult decision for people, a difficult transition for people when they've been working for a while to get back into school mode, school brain. What led to that decision for you? Is it something that you acted on right away, or is it something that you waffled for a couple of years?
Yeah, I'd say so my career I basically did consulting for 5 years at like accounting technology firms, so KPMG, Deloitte. And from there, like throughout my career, like I was just implementing financial systems for government agencies, something I absolutely gave zero shits about. I was just going through the motions and I was just doing this because it paid well. And I really didn't know that you can kind of build a career in sports that paid well. At that time, it wasn't as apparent, I would say, as it is now. And so COVID hit and I was doing a god awful commute to work every day. And it was just like once COVID hit, I was actually happy. Like, unlike most people who were pretty upset when COVID hit, I was like, I don't have to go into the office every day. This is great. And I think that expedited my want to kind of get out of this world.
Mm.
And my one buddy who I started my first job with, he had gotten into the grad program at UVA in business analytics. And I knew from there, I was like, you know what? Analytics, sports, that's a hot topic at that point. So it was like 2020, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to apply to this program, see what happens. There was like 1 day left on the deadline. Ended up getting an interview, was one of the last people accepted to the program, and it started in August 2020 and went through August 2021. And my whole focus was to just network and just build up a skill set in sports to figure out how I can make this career change. So I leveraged their career services. I talked to people across, MLB, NFL, NHL teams, sports betting sites, business side, team side. Like I was open to talking to everybody. And I just tried to build out my network that way just to see what opportunities were out there and what I'd be interested in. And then as the program ramped down, I started getting some interviews with teams, and DraftKings just at that time was the best offer. And I knew sports betting was obviously on the rise. I was a pretty active sports bettor too, so I understood the user side of it, but I didn't really understand the business side of it. So I think working there helped me get a good understanding of how that all works. And it was just interesting at the time. And there was a little bit of hockey with that because obviously you can bet on hockey. So I was like, you know what? This is the best offer. I'm going to take this and kind of see where it goes.
No, that's awesome. And I think there's a lot of good nuggets in there about making the decision to go back to school and making the most of it, whether it was networking, reaching out to people. I think a lot of times talking to current students and stuff, like people wait too long to start realizing they're going to graduate and need a job, right? I think the sooner you guys can reach out and start building that network while you're in school, start building those relationships as soon as you can. You mentioned DraftKings there, the transition into that role. Very interesting role, sportsbook operations specialist, like you said, right as the boom was really starting to happen. Talk to me about what you liked about that role, what you didn't like as much about that role, and how it was a stepping stone to your role today.
Definitely. So when I first started there, about the first 6 months to a year, I was focused on analyzing their big promotions that they post on their site for their big spenders, seeing how many people are taking it, opting into it, the amount of revenue that the company is generating from it, and then also just understanding the customer cohort of people that like to bet on these bigger promotions, which was fine. Like it wasn't necessarily something I was passionate about, but then my role kind of shifted. Just talking to my director, he realized I had more of a passion on like partnership, hockey, like media integrations with these companies. If you've seen it on any sports broadcast, there's always some sort of media integration with FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, either posting odds, doing a same game parlay, all that stuff. So that was the kind of side that interested me. And so as my role shifted there, I was more focused on all the people that we work with. So the athletes, so like the JJ Reddicks of the world, the Kevin Harts, the David Ortiz, helping them brand their bets on our site, and then taking that information, letting them know what was working, what wasn't working, helping them integrate it in their podcast because these guys mostly aren't, of the betting mind. So you have to kind of teach them the product a little bit, the phrases, making sure they aren't saying like, this is an absolute lock, can't lose, like that'll get flagged by regulators. So just trying to find that line of being able for them to speak on it. But then, like within the hockey side of things too, like Missing Curfew is the podcast that DraftKings works with, and
Mhm.
so I got to have a good relationship with those guys, and then actually ended up doing one of their episodes that Matthew Chuck was on first, and then I came on after, just talking about the betting lines and stuff, and that was kind of my first like dive into the hockey side of things on the content, using the sports betting as a plug, but then also chopping it up with Shane O'Brien and Scotty Upshaw. They're really good guys. They love sports betting too. They're actually lunatics. They'll try and like text us like, we want this, we want this. And it's like, guys, like we have like a structured, cadence, but at the same time, like they're just funny and they just really love the product and want to bet. And so I think, being able to really dive in on that side of things kind of helped me to get to where like to keep moving where I am today.
Yeah, no, it seems like you were in that role at a good time. Again, kind of during the boom of it, you got to see and touch so many different moving parts of the sports betting industry. And like you touched on, it is basically everywhere you look these days, from the billboards outside of MSG to the broadcast that's calling the game. It is everywhere. As someone who's worked on both sides of the sports betting and the hockey side of things, what do you think of it as a consumer, seeing all these broadcasters, announcers saying, "Hey, these are the odds tonight. Hey, take this." How do you feel about the exposure of sports betting in the sport today?
So I have some like interesting thoughts on that, just being on both sides, like you mentioned. I would say from a consumer's perspective, I think the big term now is generative AI. And I think a lot of what broadcasts are trying to do is make it so you're only seeing the betting content if you want to see the betting content. That's
Hmm.
how they see the future of sports betting. So it's not being shoved in people's faces who really want no part of that. But right now, that's not what it is, right? It is being kind of shoved across everyone. And I think the way that they describe the bets that they're talking about on the broadcast isn't necessarily giving the consumer the insights that they need to make an informed decision. I think they're just kind of talking about it from not like an educated perspective. They're just throwing, I want to hammer this guy to bet on to score a goal or to get a touchdown, but not actually providing the valuable insight needed to say, why do we want to do that? So I
Yeah.
think from that perspective, there's a lot more to grow on the incorporating content, betting content in the TV broadcasts. Having said that, though, I think there are things that do well that from a perspective of growing these brands, like you have Charles Barkley talking about it on the TNT broadcast. You'll have DraftKings doing the TNT NHL broadcast. They have like a same game parlay. They'll throw an over under a player prop and like a team to win. So it's not necessarily the most creative, but I think as these sports books grow in terms of these creative markets and incorporating maybe even some of the NHL edge data on, the speed bursts and stuff like that, I think you're going to have a whole new world of this micro betting that is going to be interesting for the broadcast, but also just being able to educate the people who are actually taking these bets, I think still has a long way to go.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with that. I think it's interesting, it's fun. Like you said, I dabble in some bets as well. It's always fun. You talk with your buddies, you go to a game together, whatever it is. But I think it's also kind of like you said, fair to say that the human race doesn't exactly respond positively to mass adoption of a gambling sometimes. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the next couple of years with the gambling industry. I think it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. And like you said, that genuine integration is what makes the most sense for both sides, really. Prior to that, I know that you had a stint with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. Obviously, one of the most storied historic franchises. A lot of star powers come through those doors over the past couple of years. Talk to me about that hockey analytics role and what it entailed.
Yeah, so this also kind of was coinciding with my grad program and my job starting at DraftKings. But before I even got an offer at DraftKings, like I was probably interviewing with them. So this would have been September of 2021. They similarly had posted a link on Teamwork Online, and it was just like hockey analytics role, for helping out for the season. So I just applied. And then a week later, the general manager of the team gave me a phone call and he's like, "Hey, we're trying to build a little hockey analytics group within our team. We have a couple guys already involved, and we would love to add you if you're interested." It didn't pay any money. It was totally just like part time, like 5, 10 hours a week. So it wasn't a huge investment on my part. So I was like, you know what, this will be great for a resume. It'll be great to talk to like minded people who have that analytics knowledge in the hockey space, something I'm deeply interested in. And I think from there, it kind of just built out to now we're a point where the other three guys that were working with me on this project, two guys are working on hockey analytics teams in the NHL. One guy's with the Flyers, another guy's with the Sharks, and the third guy's working in football analytics for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Hmm.
So it obviously worked out well. And for what we did, we basically just took data that the team was tracking and complemented that with SportLogic data, which is a third-party data provider that a lot of the USHL teams use. And we basically just merged the two, built some dashboards for the general manager and the coaches so that they could look at other teams' tendencies and their own team's tendencies, and then how they can stack up against, game planning for their opponents. If they wanted to talk to it on the players, I think the players were less involved on the data side of things. At that point, when they're young, you just kind of want to let the kids play, and then you can make the strategic decisions behind the scenes. So I think it was mostly focused on the staff, but we were just able to give them some insights that help them look at their scoring chances, different like defensive metrics. I think a lot of that stuff is important to them, and that's kind of what we focused on.
That's super interesting. And again, being such a popular, well-known, storied franchise, like you said, makes it great for a resume. And I think for people listening, take that part away. Keith said it's great for a resume. It didn't pay worth you know what, but it's great for a resume. And I think more people need to adopt that mindset when starting out your career. You can do it, like you said, part-time while you're doing other things. You can do it while you're in school. You got to take on some of these opportunities to get your name out there and to build your profile and resume. Again, as somebody who's been in the weeds and seen firsthand how teams are working with data on the ice, what catches your eye? What do you view as most important, or what did you view as most important during that role when it comes to these on ice advanced stats and analytics?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, even in the NHL world, but also to a lesser extent in the USHL world, I think how teams are evaluating offense is in a pretty good spot. I think you're looking at like expected goals, scoring chances created, kind of slot passes. A lot of those metrics are pretty well defined. But I think when you're looking at the defensive side of things, I think there's still work to be done on how teams are accurately evaluating defenders. And if you look at some of the contracts some of these defenders signed in the offseason, you're kind of questioning, you're like, that feels like a little rich for my blood in terms of how old they are and what they bring to the table. So I think there's still work to be done on how to evaluate a defender. And you look at someone like a Gustav Forsling, right? Someone who has passed through on waivers a couple times, picked up by Florida, given like a small deal, and then he turned it to one of the best defenders this season, and he parlayed that into a great deal. And I think that's someone as a prime example who is undervalued on what he brings to the table. And I think just as more teams are becoming more knowledgeable with all the data and information they're given, I think that you're going to see a shift on how defensemen are evaluated in the NHL, whether you want the offensive defenseman or a really big defensive defenseman or a hybrid who's able to kind of do all of it.
No, that's a great answer. And I think there's, like you said, there's so much that can still be done on the defensive side, especially, and goaltending. I feel like
Yep.
we have, goals saved above average and whatever else, but goaltending's such a crapshoot sometimes that there's
It
definitely still room
fluctuates
for
so much
improvement.
year to year. Like you'll look
Yeah.
at one goalie who plays super well that year, and then the next year it kind of craps out. It's just kind of a real crapshoot. And you have very few elite goaltenders that can bring that consistency year over year. So I think that's definitely part of the problem too.
100%. Some room for improvement there for sure. And I think with defense, it's really interesting. And I definitely can't be the first person to say this or think of this, but a buddy and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and we said like, at some point there's got to be a tracker in your stick. Because on the fence, so much of it is having an active stick, your stick being in the right place, blocking those passing lanes. So if you guys are looking for an idea or product or a tracker to start, maybe start putting trackers in sticks and making some analytics off of that. Take me all the way back here, Keith, to when you were a younger kid. I know you said you were a Devils fan, brought Dur jerseys in the apartment still to this day. How did you first get into hockey? Where'd the love first come from? How much did you play? And give me the full background.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I got to give full credit to my mom for getting me involved in hockey. So when I was 3 years old, I believe like she went to her first hockey game and fell in love immediately to the point where her and two of her other girlfriends, they ended up splitting season tickets for that year. And she had them from when I was 4 years old through high school. So what that's like, 15, 16 years. And basically, just she was taking me to all these games. She would bring me to the Devils practices at South Mountain Arena. We'd meet all the players, sign sticks, sign jerseys, sign pictures from, and the Devils were hot then, right? They won 3 Stanley Cups in a 9 year span. So you're talking like the Scott Stevens, Scott Niedermayers, Brodeurs, Scott Gomez, Brian Gianta. The list goes on and on and on of players that went through the Devils system that were just ended up being really good players. And so I think it was just a perfect combination of the Devils being good, me being exposed to a lot of that to the point where like we would go on road trips with the team. Not with the team. We would go on road trips when the team would be playing, but then also my mom would just be kind of that funny, crazy fan where she would end up like talking to like Pat Burns was the head coach at the time. Like we went out with him in Nashville. Doc Emmerich, like we built a good relationship with Doc. So like we would see him at the hotel sometimes. Lou Lamoriello was a guy I would wait outside of his box because when I grew up, like my dream was to be a general manager of a hockey team. Still my dream in some capacity, but just like following his lead, like the way he built that team and stuff, and got a good relationship with him. Like Scott Gomez was cutting my meat at a Devils dinner when I was like 5 years old. So I think just a lot of those like memories is kind of what really made me passionate. And then as I've gotten older, I've really wanted to take on more of like the analytical, the hockey side of things, just understanding the game, consuming as much hockey content as I can in this space. There's a lot of it now, but maybe not a lot of it that's great. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement within the hockey content space, especially on linear media. I think there's definitely a lot of room there. And so I think just trying to consume as much content as possible, like some of the people you've already had on your show, like the Steve Dangles of the world, Johnny Lazarus, the Empty Netters guys, they're all doing great things more in like the digital space. And I think there needs to kind of be more of that, but more of that quality kind of content. And I like the way that they're kind of building it out. Even like Arda too, like he's a guy I met at Sloan Analytics Conference in March. Such a nice guy, like brought me down to the green room, so I'm rubbing shoulders with like the Michael Rubins of the world, and he just like just really passionate about hockey and good content. Like he's always wanting to do more stuff with the Rangers too, and I'm always trying to help him out to kind of facilitate that. Just because he's been so nice to me, trying to help out, and I think just a lot of that is kind of what really brings me to hockey is not just the love for the sport, but also the community and the people that are involved in it.
Yeah, very well said. And I think I want to spin off of that question by asking a little bit about networking. I think as you've heard me say on every other podcast, it's a giant buzzword, but it's the most important thing that you can do as you try to advance your career. You named a lot of cool people that you've gotten to meet there through your different roles. You've had a lot of cool different roles. You touched on building your network when you were at grad school. How does somebody who just graduated or is looking to switch industries, how do they go about networking today in 2024?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I'm super passionate about is like the networking side of things. I'm constantly trying to grow my network. Even when I have a job I love, like my current role with the Rangers, like I'm still trying to grow my network, get my name out there with people in hockey. So a lot of it is mostly just kind of LinkedIn cold reach outs. Connecting with people that you'd be interested in talking to, whether they work for a company or you're specifically interested in that person. And I think just making sure that the email, and this will be funny because people now try to network with me because of my roles at both DraftKings and the Rangers.
Mm.
Some people spell my name wrong. They put like an I before E. I've gotten called Kevin a few times when my name is literally right there. So one part of it is just making sure you spell the person's name right. When you're sending a message, don't do 4 or 5 paragraphs. Be concise and to the point. Just ask them for 15 minutes. Offer to buy them a coffee. Let them know you're flexible. You'll do over Zoom, over phone call, like in person, whatever works for them. And don't be dissuaded when people don't respond. I'd say like, I have like a 20 to 30% response rate. Like there's plenty of people who I've reached out to that have not responded to me, and that's totally okay. And I was listening to your episode with Johnny where he said it's the rule of three. Like don't be afraid to follow up in like 2, 3 weeks. I wouldn't follow up the next day if they don't respond, but I think giving them the proper time and space is something that's important. And also, like you mentioned now, when I've had interviews, like so I've interviewed for a company like Sport Logic where Mike Kelly was like my final round interview. He's all over NHL Network. He does hits on TNT. Like he's all in the hockey media space. He's someone I've stayed in close touch with as well. Like after that interview, I check in with him like every 4 or 5 months. I, talk to him about Sport Logic, give him some ideas I think from a content side of things that I think would help Sport Logic. So like that, I just kind of just, showing where you can add value if there was to be a role that would open up someday. And also just, making sure you're following up. Don't just network with someone once for 15 minutes. They're going to forget about you tomorrow. It's building that sustained relationship, and I've tried to do that as much as possible. Like you said, like with Mike Kelly, but also like Megan Chaika of Stathletes. She's been a real big inspiration for me. Kind of what she's built there. I think that's super interesting. Eric Lowe, he's a guy who runs ESPN's NHL production. So just like working with, like talking to him, like I interviewed with him for a role like 4 years ago for like a sports betting analyst, and just checking in every 6 months I think is big. So a lot of that is kind of what I'd say is like, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be dissuaded if they don't respond to you. Give them some time. Don't be scared to follow up. And then also, once you've had that initial connection, please follow up in the next few months because you're not going to build a relationship by one 15-minute phone call.
Awesome answer. A plus. I think that's going to be the clip of the show. I think I'm going to post that at least once a month on socials for you guys to make sure you're following along with. But yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. And I think a couple things to piggyback off that you said there, like you don't always have to ask for something super specific, but don't say nothing either, right? I think that's a big thing that I see with people is like they'll just message you, be like, hey, like would love to network. And it's like, what do you mean? What does that mean? Like,
Right.
what do you actually want? But at the same time, don't say, hey, would you donate 2 grand to my favorite charity? And then we can talk about it, right? So there's a happy medium to that. And then the name, I think you touched on, is a very big thing too. Like you said, you got to spell the names right. You got to put the right names. I've had a couple people call this jobs in hockey and Nick Bowens and all these different things the last couple of weeks. And it stands out a lot to you, right? But I was told from a young age, people's favorite thing to hear is their own name, right? So make sure, guys, when you are starting out a message, say, hey, Keith, say, hey, Nick. Like, don't just go, hey there. If you go, hey there, I instantly know you copy and pasted this from the 6 other people that you reached out to today. And chances are they didn't get back to you either. So again, that was a perfect answer by you, Keith. Any other advice for somebody starting out their career today? How to look for jobs? You mentioned applying online. You mentioned the newsletter. But how would you suggest somebody go about finding their dream role today?
Yeah, just to piggyback off what you said too, I
Yeah.
think when you're writing that message, like find something that like relates just to that one person so they feel a little
Yes.
personalization in the message. Like I think that's so important. If they read a message that feels like it was copy and pasted, they're definitely less likely to respond.
Yeah.
Um,
A
but
hundred
to
percent.
answer yeah, to answer your question though on like what to do to get a job in hockey or just a sports job in general, I think like you said, the Working in Hockey newsletter has just been absolutely incredible. It aggregates the jobs well, it has the links to the jobs, it explains what the role is, and I think it's very great specific to hockey. I think just keeping on checking these sports websites like Teamwork Online is probably the number one for all jobs in the space. I think making sure you're following the right people on LinkedIn too. Like sometimes they'll be posting about these jobs and it'll be directed directly to the team's website. I think those might miss through Teamwork Online sometimes. So just making sure you're always just constantly checking your feeds, checking the job feeds. If you have some companies you're interested in, always find that company on LinkedIn, connect with a few people there, reach out, ask them, this is what I'd be interested in. Is there a role like that? Do you know of anything coming up? I think a lot of that plays in. It's hard to get your job in hockey. Like Arda said, I think in his interview, there's not a lot of supply and there's a ton of demand. And the issue with that too is you're going to probably get paid less than what you would in a normal job just because of the teams have so much leverage on what they can pay you because they can get, even if you're the best candidate, they can probably find someone who's 90% as good as you that might be willing to take 50% less. They're going to hire that person 10 times out of 10. So it's a fine balance of knowing your value but also understanding where the teams are coming from and how you can balance that to find a sustainable working wage for a job that you really are passionate and interested in.
No, that's a great response, and I think great advice for anybody looking to start out their career. Last question that I've tried to start asking in all these interviews, Keith. You mentioned young Keith wanting to grow up, be a general manager. You mentioned, of course, loving the role that you're in today. Where do you see your career going? Where do you want to be in 5, 10 years? Are there anything that you think similar to the sports book, the hockey analytics? Are there things that you think are on the up and up that you have a lot of interest in?
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say in 5 years from now, if I was still working for the Rangers, strategizing about their content, there's no qualms there. Like it's something I can dig my teeth into. It kind of combines a couple things I'm very interested in, hockey and content. So I think there's definitely no issues staying there and continuing that path. I think it's a great role. It's a good company. I think all things are good there. Having said that, I think working on the team side is always something I'm interested in. And like I was at a bar in Hoboken, so I live right outside of the city, like 3 months ago, and we're coming out of the car. We're sitting, me and my girlfriend are sitting down at a table, and then who comes out of an Uber but Johnny Lazarus, his favorite player, Jack Hughes, with Quinn Hughes, with Luke Hughes, with two of their buddies. So I like kick my girlfriend. I'm like, we got to go up there. So then we start walking up and like we're hanging out. Like we're not going to bother them, obviously. But then 10 minutes later, Tom Fitzgerald comes in, Devils general manager with his wife. They're all hanging out together. Then eventually the boys leave and Tom Fitzgerald's just there and he's standing right next to me. So I just strike up a conversation with him and I talked to him for 30 minutes. And now, then he gave me his card at the end of it. And now he's someone that's in my network. So it's also just, being educated on what you want to talk about at any given time. Like I wasn't prepared for any conversation that day, but I just know the ins and outs of hockey and I'm able to converse with someone who no one would know at a bar in Hoboken. Like a lot of people
Yeah.
wouldn't know who that is. I think only a couple people even knew who Jack and Quinn were. Like it was crazy. So I think just being prepared for any given opportunity, never turn down anything either. I think always, always saying yes to things. Sometimes it's tough, right? You don't want to sacrifice too much and you want to be valued for the work you're doing, but when you're just starting out, sometimes you're going to have to eat a shit sandwich at first just to put it on your resume, get your name out there, and then also show what value you could bring to the table. So I think a lot of that is just really trying to make the most of it. And really, I still don't know exactly what I want to do, right? Like working on a team side would be great. I've also like had conversations with hockey agencies. Like that is something that could be interesting to me as well. Like working on the agency side of things with the players, building out their personal brands through content, helping use the data to like to figure out what their value is on the open market. So I think there's a ton of different things within hockey, like even hockey media and hockey betting. Like me and Johnny did a sports betting show before I started at MSG for 4 months until I got to MSG and they made me shut it down. But that's an interesting thing to me too, where we ended up talking to like Sarah Sivian, we had Ariel Hawani on the show. Like we got good people on the show and we were able to just talk our love for hockey and sports betting. And so I think that's always something that interests me too. And like I mentioned too, like the hockey media, like the way they describe it on linear television is not very good right now. If there's a way to improve that in any capacity, that's something I'd also be interested in too, just talking the game, but in a more informed, educated way, but then also just being more apparent about it. It's not on TV enough in the States. I mean, maybe you're used to it in Canada where TSN and Sportsnet get to talk about hockey all the time. It is not like that in the States with ESPN. So I think getting more exposure to hockey in the traditional media sense is something that I'm passionate about too.
Totally. Yeah. It sounds like Keith, a man of many interests, a man of many experiences, and I think that's awesome. I will give a shout out to the newest member of the Working in Hockey team, Nolan, who just joined as a video editor. Nolan's going to be busy with this episode because there's a lot of good nuggets of wisdom in here, Keith. This has been fantastic. Tell the people where they can find you and how to reach out to you if they have questions.
Yep, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, so just search my name, Keith Kavanaugh. It's probably below right there. And then also my socials are just at Keith Cav Jr. That's where you can find me on Twitter. TikTok this year, I did some just hockey content videos, was able to generate a lot of views for some of them. So that's something I'm also interested in, just talking hockey, leveraging data and storylines together. So that's where you can find me on socials. And sorry, Nolan, for all these clips you're going to have to cut up, but congrats on joining the team.
Putting you to the test here, Nolan. Guys, this has been another episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. Be sure to subscribe down below. Check out Keith on all socials. Subscribe to the free weekly newsletter compiling every open hockey job in the industry, and we'll see you next week.